Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Australian Red Cross for the seventh instalment of the Recovery Uncovered series, Work That Matters, Pathways in Disaster Recovery. My name's Erin Pully. I'm the National Recovery Manager at Australian Red Cross, and as always, I'm delighted to be your host today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm hosting this event from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I'd like to pay my respects to any of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today from all across Australia. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians in which you're all joining us from. Next week is National Reconciliation Week. The theme for this year is Bridging Now to Next, and I really encourage you all to look up what's happening in your local area around Reconciliation Week and get involved celebrating what is a long-lasting, continuous culture with connection to land, sea, and air in Australia. Before we begin, I've got some brief housekeeping notes. We are recording today's event, and once we get the recording up on our YouTube channel, we will send that out to the participants and for people who are unable to stay either for the whole time or unable to make it today. At 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, we'll be using the Q&A function. So you can use the Q&A function. It's in the little panel down the bottom of your screen. People can upvote questions for our panelists today. And just please use the chat window, introduce yourself, introduce the lands that you're joining us from, and just a reminder to please keep it kind and respectful, both to our participants and our panelists today. This webinar is the seventh of the Recovery Uncovered series presented by the Disaster Recovery Mentors, hosted by Australian Red Cross. The Disaster Recovery Mentors program is coordinated by Australian Red Cross and aims to support disaster-affected communities, their leaders, and the practitioners who support them in recovery. As part of this program, the Recovery Uncovered webinar series has been designed to provide recovery workers and practitioners with insights into disaster recovery from a community perspective. In today's webinar, I've got two fabulous panelists joining who will be talking about how they've navigated the complexities and challenges of moving into disaster recovery roles. Talking about their lived experience. There may or may not be some imposter syndrome in the room. Balancing your personal recovery with community recovery, post-traumatic growth, and how to support community members to become community leaders. Our first presenter, Sabrina Davies, is a senior resilience officer at Australian Red Cross. She became a community leader after the 2019 Black Summer Bushfires devastated her hometown of Kangaroo Island. She organised lots of mental health conversations and wellbeing conversations, created a bushfire recovery documentary film. If anyone would like to watch it, it's called Humans of Kangaroo Island, and advocated for the needs of local farm firefighters, all while she was navigating the complexity of rebuilding her home and farm after the fires. Over the last 5 years, Sabrina's used her lived experience as a tool to support other disaster-affected communities across Australia, volunteering as a disaster recovery mentor with Australian Red Cross and co-designing the Disaster Wise network. We're lucky enough that Sabrina joined the Red Cross as a senior resilience officer in 2024 and has been helping prepare for emergencies and disasters since then. Joining Sabrina is Tracey Greenaway, who has over 30 years of experience working in emergency services. Tracey's hometown was devastated by the 2013 Blue Mountains Bushfires, where over 200 homes were lost. And Tracey subsequently became the recovery team leader for the New South Wales bushfires. During this time, she supported over 1,000 households in the region. She's also provided support to communities internationally, supporting United Way of Hyderabad with post-disaster psychosocial recovery, support for communities with no power, which is quite topical because we've had some technical issues this morning with power outages in Kangaroo Island. So Tracey is now working with the Australian Red Cross in the Urban Heat Resilience Program, working with communities across Western Sydney to bring awareness to the dangers of extreme heat. Welcome, Tracey and Sabrina, and I'm really keen to hear a bit about your experience with disasters, and maybe just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for the intro, Erin, and thank you so much for having me and Tracey today. It's nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time. So I think you already told quite a bit about me, but as Erin mentioned, I live on beautiful Kangaroo Island in South Australia, and have lived here for the last 16 years and experienced the Black Summer Fires over here. I'm very passionate about community and community recovery and now resilience, and yeah, look forward to talking about this more later.
Hello, everyone. So thank you, Erin, for the introduction. So my experience with disasters would be, I started kind of very early in life. I remember when I was 3, the 1977 fires, that dates me, coming through the mountains. And I don't remember much about the fires themselves because I was very young. I just remember mostly my mum's reaction to that. So I remember her being frightened. I remember the smoke and being shipped off to grandma's very quickly. And I just remember the orange glow in the distance. And I remember coming back home in our backyard all being burnt out. And I think that was from a hazard reduction, really. And then my further experience at home would be the 94 fires. And if people in the New South Wales or East Coast of Australia would remember that that was a season of like really bad fires. We had terrible fires in the Blue Mountains, and my boyfriend then at the time, his family property was badly damaged with a lot of loss, and his grandparents and uncle, and he's now my husband. And that was just a really big experience for me. I was 19. And then, so we've had big gaps between big fires, and then of course, we've had lots of smaller fires in between, but then 2013 was a really bad one. In between that period of time, we almost lost the home that we had built, and another fire in between that. So in all those years, it seems to have been lots of close contacts with bushfires in the Blue Mountains. It's been my experience. Thanks, Taryn.
So sort of rolling disaster experience, Tracey, and sounds like it's quite different to yours, Sabrina, in that you kind of were just doing life, really, and then in 2020 everything changed. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, thanks, Erin. Probably a little bit more about my background for people's understanding too is I'm not Australian. I came here from Germany 16 years ago. Grew up in the 80s in Eastern Germany, south of Berlin, behind the wall, and probably the only disaster I've experienced in my childhood was the political disaster that we had to live through. In later years, I don't really recall any emergencies or disasters in my region, but maybe that was also an age thing, and I didn't really, nothing worth mentioning. There was talk about a once-in-a-century flood that had happened in our region, but I have never seen it. And I probably didn't really think much about disasters or bigger emergencies until I came to Australia, where I felt like there was a total different focus over here. People here talk about the weather every day. Living on a farm now and like in an agricultural community, conversation starts with how much rain have you had, pretty much every time you meet someone. And so weather has a very different focus over here than it ever did living in Germany. And the rain conversations lead into, what else is happening around the country in the States, drought, cyclones. There's so much going on in Australia. And I think I didn't really have an awareness of that beforehand. When I first came over here in 2008, I came as a backpacker traveling around in a camper van. And when I started driving around, that was when the fires in Victoria in 2009 started, which obviously ended up being most devastating fires we've seen in the country. And I didn't really pick up on that, to be honest. I was so blissfully unaware of disasters and the consequences traveling around the country. I saw news snippets here and there on my travels and roadhouses and just thought, wow, that's terrible. But I didn't really understand the magnitude of it at the time. And probably didn't really until I moved to Kangaroo Island and fell in love. And my husband kept talking about summers and getting ready and having a firefighting unit, and that fires were just a common thing in Australia every summer. I don't think I really understood that. And I think it was not until then that I really opened my eyes to it. In 2019-20, Kangaroo Island was devastated by the Black Summer fires. We actually lost 2/3 of the island. Homes, livestock, wildlife, farmland, infrastructure were destroyed, and we lost our entire livelihood. We lost our entire property, including all the infrastructure, all our animals and our home, and relocated 100 kilometres away into a different town on the island. I think for me, I didn't really at that point understand what had hit us. Just the devastation of, well, firstly, I thought that my husband had died in the fires for a few hours, and I think the shock of that took me a while to get over. And then once I appreciated us making it through that safely, I was just shocked by the devastation of being homeless and having nowhere to go back to, and not understanding what the next day, next week, next month, next years were going to look like. And what happened afterwards, I think, was the biggest disaster for me. It was the recovery period. And we're still recovering 5 years later. Now in the community obviously has rebuilt most things, but it's the emotional rebuild that's still taken a really long time, and that has really had a huge impact on me over the years, in all facets of my life.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sabrina, for sharing that. Stuff is really full on and intense. And it's such an important reminder about the long-term nature of recovery. 5 years and you're still recovering. I think a lot of people around the traps would tend to agree with that statement. Thank you. Tracey, you've got a bit of a different story in the sense that you've been dealing with fires. It's sort of similar to how Sabrina was talking about how her husband gets ready for fires every year. I guess, when did your perception of the impacts of disasters change, and how do you think they've shaped you, both professionally and personally?
Yeah. Interesting question. So after the 94 fires, my perception, I've had two shifts. So one was then. So I started volunteering straight away with Salvation Army Emergency Services, and I've been a volunteer ever since. So that's going on 30 years now. And through that, I have volunteered in all kinds of things, as you saw in that intro at the beginning. And I've been in many a disaster situation, all kinds of things. So I've had a lot of experience in different disasters and seen people in all kinds of trauma. and also emergency services workers in all kinds of situations. But it wasn't until 2013 when it was another really bad bushfire in my town where I live, where I've grown up my whole life, when I was at home by myself and my girls were in lockdown in the school and my husband was not on the mountain. And that was another pivot point for me. That changed everything for me. And I was volunteering in that space for another 5 months. When your community is devastated like that, that was the total change, the perception that it's different when you can work in a disaster in another space to when it is your own home. I just was never the same after that. And I just realized I can't go back to working like, other jobs, like my other normal life. This was now something I had to just, this was the thing for me. I just had to make this my work with purpose. It was life-changing, totally life-changing. It was a massive amount of work that was involved. I worked in that role for 3.5 years. And yeah, I think when it's in your own home space with people that you have, you know and love, it's your community, the houses and properties, it's the air you breathe and the soil that you walk on, it's life-changing. Yeah, that was the moment.
I can agree with that, Tracey. I think for me, like I mentioned earlier, when I travelled around Australia, it was the first time that I was aware of how many disasters actually happen in this country and probably across other countries as well. But I felt like it was a bit like when you decide to buy a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere. Like as soon as you have the awareness, it just hit me. I started seeing it everywhere and I started seeing it all around me. But I don't think it actually hit me until the fires that started here on the island, and someone, I say down the road on Kangaroo Island, nothing's down the road, but someone in my neighbourhood, probably about 20 kilometres away, was in danger, and all the firefighters went over there to help her. And there was a lot of communication on WhatsApp groups and Facebook and people just sharing information on what's going on. And at that moment, when it was someone that might lose their home that I knew, that was in my circle of friends and acquaintances, and it was such a life-changing moment. I was so devastated at the time. She didn't end up losing her house. The family still has their house even after the big fires went through. But in that moment, it totally unsettled me. I just couldn't believe it. This, in the past, it had always been it felt like a distant thing, news headlines that appeared in a few days, the Thailand tsunami and cyclones in Queensland. That was not in my neighbourhood. It didn't really, I thought, that's not really impacting me. You kind of just brush it away. Maybe it's like keeping yourself emotionally afloat because you don't want to think about it. But that moment really hit home for me. And I thought it could happen to anyone now. Like it could just get all of us. And I was terrified. And I think, that's when the shift happened for me.
At that moment, Sabrina, did you think 5 years later you'd be talking about still recovering?
No, I think I had a very short-sighted sort of action plan at the time. For me, it was suddenly like, okay, what do I need to pack? Because up until that point, I had never thought about preparing for anything because like many people, it wasn't going to happen to me. So in that moment, when I heard someone was threatened, their home was threatened, I was there with my kids. I was alone. My husband was out trying to protect other people's assets and lives. And I just thought, okay, just for now in the next 2 days, what can I do to keep us safe? It was really short-term thinking. And yes, I would never probably believe that I would be sitting in this space and doing the work that I do now back then.
Thanks, Sabrina. What about you, Tracey? I mean, you worked with communities a lot previous to the fires that hit your hometown. Was it really when your people, your community were hit that you felt things changed, or was there already the seeds? I mean, it's tricky because you grew
so
up.
I'm a passionate community person. I was already, involved in the PNC at school. I was running as a volunteer running a patchwork group. I'm like that kind of person. But for me, stepping into that space, there's a difference between working, volunteering your time, doing emergency services work in another community where you go there and you do that support and you come home, to when it is in your space and it is the people that you know and you've grown up with. Like, there's people that have known me since I was a baby. So people that I have gone to school with my entire life, and whose children go to school with my children. People who, were my teachers. It's that kind of connection that you have, who have lost their houses. It's that kind of connection that you have in your community that now, I had a not a burden, but a sense of wanting to do more, to use the knowledge that I had from my previous experience. But I had a deep-seated desire to want to step into this space and do something. And that has been the driver to continue on with it, because I think there's people like me and Sabrina that come out of disasters, that rise up, local leaders that rise up, or local people that are forever changed after something like this, and realize they need to continue on in some way and use the skills that they've learned to help their community or other communities. And that's why we sort of want to have a chat about it, because it's just an amazing thing to be able to do it. It's not easy though. It's not easy.
No. We'll come to how we sustain ourselves in this, and I'm really keen to hear later on about how you guys have managed to keep going and keep staying in this sector, given the challenges it brings. I'm keen to understand how you navigated from sort of being a community member, impacted community leader, and then, moving in to either a volunteer or paid work. Did you feel like you were sufficiently qualified? Don't jump all at once.
I wasn't sure who the question was for. I'll jump in. I think for me, now that I look back at it, I feel like it was a natural progression. Again, I hadn't been through multiple disasters. It was one disaster for me, and it was right in my home on my doorstep. And so I only have this experience to share. But I think following the fires, we had so many services, agencies, organizations come in that helped wherever they saw a need. There's a lot of locals and South Australians who really wanted to support the affected families, and anything from community gardens to frozen meals and donated quilts and whatever else was donated and covered. I feel like in the beginning it was all the agencies that were leading our community, and that was really good, because I think personally too, and probably many of my community members found themselves in the same space where we couldn't think. Like, I wouldn't have been or had the capacity yet at that point to step up and be a leader. I was down. I felt like a bus had hit me and 50 people walked over top of me. I was not sleeping. I was trying to have some sort of normality with my children. There would have been no energy left in me to step up and help. And I needed help at that point. So that was really good when the agencies came in and organised, recovery catch-ups, barbecues. We even had, large concerts with the Army Band. And there was just a lot of things that happened apart from the usual recovery steps that happen anyway. But a lot of those things sort of helped with lifting morale and people's spirits. But then in March 2020, COVID hit. it kind of stopped all of that, and we were all left here in our little isolation bubbles, dealing with the hardest challenge of our life. Or like, for me, it was the hardest challenge of my life to that point. And so what happened with COVID and the weeks after that, or the months after that, was just creating a huge amount of loneliness within me, and not being able to catch up with other community members, not being able to see how others were going through their recovery, and even just that support that you give one another in a conversation. That I really, really lacked that and really missed it. And it was sort of drove me into starting a community project, which you mentioned earlier, called Humans of Kangaroo Island, which was like just a storytelling project, and then ended up becoming a fundraising project. So that was probably for me the very first time I stepped into doing something different and being able to help my community with telling my story and the story of others, and then having feeling some sort of a control. It also gave me a great purpose every day to be able to have something to do. I had moved 100 kilometers away into a newish community. I was trying to wrangle a lot of paperwork, but I had lost all my normal routines and comfort, and I really didn't know what to do with myself. I felt a huge shift and loss of identity. And I think having that project gave me something to do. And once I worked out that we could use the project to help people, it was even better. It just kept me going. It was a lifesaver for me, and it ended up being really helpful to the wider community. And I think seeing that, like even this little project for me was like, wow, like this is what we can do together. If, I volunteer my time with things, and other people came on, and I think it started something in me, like a light bulb went on, and it started sort of my journey into volunteering more and doing more things in this space, wanting to give people a voice, advocating for people that didn't have one, wanting to make sure we get all the services and access to everything we needed. And then I also realized that there was a lot of things that happened during our recovery that I was not happy with, and I assumed that these happen regularly in other communities. And I wanted to take my lived experience and make sure that maybe that we can create change. We can change how things happen and make it better for the unfortunate people that come after us, because there will be more, and I knew that. I just didn't know how to do that. So I started volunteering in different spaces that were off island, where I could support other communities and do more. So one of them was obviously becoming a disaster recovery mentor with the Australian Red Cross, knowing that I could support communities all around Australia, and feel like my lived experience was useful in some way, and could benefit someone out there that might have felt or might feel as lonely as I did after the fires. And the other thing was, creating the Disaster Wise Network, connecting with other communities and looking at other community-led projects and just learning from one another that way. And I think over time it sort of snowballed into getting to know more people that volunteer, mentor, but also work in this space. And there was like a shift happening, and I realized that maybe this could be something I could do. I just didn't know what that could look like, or how I would step into that space, if there was even a space for me, and how long it takes, what do I need, what education do I need, is what I have experienced enough? There was a lot of questions, and so it was quite a journey. It took me 4 years to move into the space. And in that time, I just did a lot of connecting and volunteering.
Thanks, Sabrina. And I think, a lot of university degrees take 4 years. So you've got 4 years of reality that you navigated with grace and gave back to lots of people around Australia. It's pretty incredible. Tracey, I guess you were sort of already hitting the ground running with your community, and then trying to navigate you've kind of come at it from the other way. So I'm just keen to hear your kind of considerations for people when they're moving into the role. Like, what are the benefits of having lived experience, but also what are the challenges? How's your work-life balance?
Shocking, terrible. Don't follow the way I did it. There is better ways of doing it. So I came into that role at 5 months after the 17th of October fires, and I was the team leader for the recovery for Salvation Army for all fires in New South Wales for the October fires. So prior to that, there had been fires in our area in the September before that. So my parents-in-law's property had been burnt out the September before. So and other properties in that area. But so by the time I had finished up, I had dealt with 996 households, and I can highly recommend, like, there were better ways to do things than the way I did it then. So I think I had come into it with fantastic intentions and an absolute love for community, and I had excellent support around me, excellent support. But a lot of the time when you come in as a community member, you have wonderful community knowledge and you know the people, you understand what's going on. But I felt a lot of the time, yes, I had that sneaking imposter syndrome. Like I did not know a lot of all of the state processes around the recovery process because I was not operating at that level. And local government, I mean, I knew some local government things, but there's a lot of state agencies that get involved. There's a lot of other other agencies that turn up. I didn't know all of that. I was absolutely flat out busy in my local community and dealing with, other communities up the coast. So a lot of the time I was honestly thinking, what on earth am I doing a lot of the time? And I am sure there are people in this webinar who know what I'm talking about. There's just a lot of the time you are just hoping you can keep a poker face, which I can't play poker, that you're just hoping you can get through it because there's just so much that you don't know. And I did spend a lot of time ringing around recovery centres in Victoria saying, how do you do this? Like, what are we, like, where are we up to with this? Or like just making sure I was on track or doing the right thing, because, every disaster is not the first one. It's been done before. So that transition, although I had all this experience being involved in disasters, it really doesn't mean anything when it comes to stepping into that professional space. So like working in that space, when the first time, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's really hard when it's in your own space. I think it's as much learning that you can do really helps. But the best thing for me was having supportive people surround me. So within my organization, I had wonderful support. We had a bunch of local organizations that got together in a wellbeing committee. There was a number of them who had, we had excellent connections with each other. But even out of all of those people that I had really good support, I was the only one who lived there. So at the end of the day, I was the only one I lived in the area. So there was no getting away from, like, it's not like you go home out of area. So yeah, having some support or other people who live in the area. I think that's why I connected. Your things like friendships change. And Sabrina mentioned loneliness. That happened a lot for me. The loneliness is a real thing. Friendships fell away for me because other people didn't understand what the process was like. Other people didn't understand how busy you are or that your conversations change. They don't understand what your community's going through or that other people in the community going through. They don't understand that, like, the next 5 years of your life is going to be this thing. So, yeah, I think you develop new friendships with other people that think this way, that understand recovery, that can support you, and you can support them. So that's a big change in that transition while you're moving into this kind of a role. And I think finding those people when you're really busy, it's a bit tricky, but they will come alongside. And I think if you have any opportunity to find them, usually it's like in an interagency or you bump into them somewhere, if you can connect with people like that, it will help you a lot in that process to find someone who's on the same wavelength. And for me, I found that a lot even after I finished that role. When I decided this was a thing for me, I went back to uni and did a humanitarian and development degree, and that's when I found a cohort of people who think the same way, and particularly the lecturing staff. And I was able to really develop that further knowledge and put the theory to all of this practice that I had developed, and make all these connections. And I'm like, oh, this is makes all this sense. But yeah, finding those other people to support you, really important when you want to do this as a potential role.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think Tracey and I talked about this before. I think loneliness is such a big factor in so many situations. Another thing for me where I felt the loneliness was when I made the decision that I wanted to stay in this space too, was within my community, that people didn't understand why I wanted to do more here. And I wanted to support not only my community, but other communities. I wanted to volunteer more, and I wanted to maybe move on and work in this space. People sort of made me look like I was crazy. Why don't you just want to leave this behind? This is, you're on your way to recovery, just build your house and move back in, and life goes back to a new normal. But I couldn't do that. I feel like my eyes had been opened to something that I couldn't unsee anymore, and I didn't want to. I had experienced a huge shift within me, and knowing what I now knew and what I'd experienced, I think there's the humanitarian in us. I think that I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to move on. I wanted to take what I've learned and what we've lived through and make some sort of difference, to know in what capacity. But it made me feel really lonely because no one else here really felt like that. And I had a lot of friends, family, acquaintances that sort of just said, oh, you'll get over that. That's just your trauma, and you just want to talk about it. But it wasn't just that. It just didn't stop. I just, the more I was meeting people, and especially when we had our very first in-person, or the very first one that I joined in-person gathering with the disaster recovery mentors, and I was in a room with others who had lived through disasters, many of them multiple disasters, and many of them over decades. I just felt so at home, because here I was in a room with like-minded people that could understand, my shifts. They understood my experience, they understood my decisions, and they could also understand the way I was feeling, that imposter syndrome that was mentioned earlier. When I wanted to apply for a job, I never worked in emergency services or emergency management sector, and asked myself multiple times, was even qualified enough? Shall I just continue to volunteer? But how long can you do that? You volunteer in your community, but how much longer can you keep going, especially in recovery when our personal funds were at some point exhausted? I wanted to volunteer. I wanted to volunteer every day, all day, but I just financially couldn't do it. So I was trying to find a space where I could still do that, but in a paid capacity. And did I have what it takes to support others? I sort of thought, and I thought, yeah, I do. Do I have enough theoretical knowledge and research background? Probably not. I just felt like little old Sabrina wanting to make a difference, and that hadn't really studied effects of disasters in other communities, but I understood what it had done to mine. So I tried to educate myself more, attended, multiple courses, did a lot of reading online, connected with a lot of people. And in the end, I tried to just ignore that niggling voice in the back that kept telling me I wasn't good enough, and I didn't have enough you know, that could sustain me through a professional role, and applied with the Australian Red Cross. So I first applied and became actually a disaster recovery officer here on Kangaroo Island, which was ideal. I could not only help my own community, but I could also learn more in the process and work with people that have been in this space for a long time. And like, that's when I realized how appreciated my knowledge was. I had always previously felt, and this was just my own voice. It wasn't anyone else telling me. It was just my own voices saying that I probably couldn't do this in a paid or professional space. And suddenly there were people that wanted to hear my learnings and wanted to hear my opinion on certain resources we were using. And it was really valued. They were really keen to learn from what I had been through. So I felt really lucky to have found a place where I could make an impact on a larger scale.
Full disclosure, I've got goosebumps hearing that. So thank you, Sabrina. And there's so many chats in the comments in the chat about thank you for being so authentic about the reality of working and living in disaster. So many thanks for your valuable insights, beautiful solidarity. Yay! So yeah, I think it's pretty incredible. I think this is one I want to tease out with both of you, because I think you've both touched on it around isolation, but also connection, the need to feel valued and a sense of belonging. What were the most supportive things that people did to help you navigate bringing that into the space? I know, Sabrina, you were talking about the disaster recovery mentors and being in a room full of people who got you. And Tracey, you were talking about having incredible organizational support, but at the same time, you then had to go home to your community and kind of navigate home life as well in recovery. What worked, and what would you recommend to recovery practitioners working with community members or leaders who may want to look into a career into this sort of thing?
Okay, I'll jump in here. So for me, a pivotal thing that absolutely was the turning point for me is, I'm not sure, I'm assuming it was Red Cross, brought over Jolie Wills from New Zealand. I'm assuming it's Red Cross. And she came and ran some sessions. So she'd been heavily involved in the Christchurch earthquake, and brought over a resource leading in through the chaos, I think it's called. If we have that resource that we can put in the chat, if you're involved in any kind of disaster recovery, this thing honestly saved me from losing my mind, because it just, I have sent this to hundreds of people. This is how good it is for me. Well, this is how good it was for me. I'm hoping it is for you too, because it placed me with other people that are going through the same thing as a leader. So it instantly sort of removed that imposter syndrome from me, in a way that it just meant I wasn't alone. Like, I just felt like I was losing my mind at a stage. You all know it if you work in the space, when just everything is going really bad. And I was thinking, what am I doing? This is really bad. And I honestly thought, this is just, I just can't seem to do this, and I'm on my own. I'm on my own in this, and I wasn't having any understanding of how I could possibly see my way through this. And she came and was like, this is what happened to me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we're twins. That's how I felt. Like how could you be me in this? This is exactly what I'm going through, like word for word. That resource was the key for me. And I think it is having other people with a lived experience of like the emotions that you go through. And like, it's just simple things. It's simple things of like, you know, like in a bushfire situation, it's like, you know, when the weeds grow back, or there's like the smell of smoke, how many times you wash your hair a day, or like it's all those simple little things that someone can speak to you about, you know, what your kids are going through, or you know what the community's going through at certain times of the year, when, you know, like helicopters or any of those things that they can just mention at a certain time, and you go, oh, I'm not on my own here. So having another person, a mentor, was just, I mean, she didn't mentor me. She just came and gave me that resource. And I went, that's all I needed to help me. That was a fantastic thing. But I think if I had have had a mentor that could have stepped me through, that would have been brilliant. But at the time, that was not really available, and I probably wouldn't have been in the headspace to even accept it. But that would have been my number one pick.
I think I agree. There's lots of things I agree with, but one thing for me was the mentoring. I think that was something that helped me even see my own potential. I, you know, was an affected community member, and I was just kind of surviving for a long time every day while rebuilding our life. Like it took us 2.5, nearly 3 years to build a new house and be back on the land that we love. And in that time, I have a friend on the island who so happened to become our Red Cross disaster recovery officer right after the fires, friend and neighbour, and that I've known most of the time that I've lived here on the island, one of the first people I met, and which was Joe Tippett. Maybe people have met him. We all love our Joe. Joe has always been a friend, but he used to be my employer years and years ago when I first came over. And he just saw something in me that I didn't see. He first threw the word community leader at me, and I was looking at him like, what do you mean by that? What do you even see there? And he would just support me and mentor me and offer opportunities, open doors, talk about possibilities that I didn't even picture, connect me with networks, and constantly treat me as a leader as well. And I think that really enabled me to take the next step. During all that time, just seeing someone's comment about disaster fatigue, I was just about to mention that I was really fatigued, but having someone encourage me to keep going through the loneliness and the challenges and the imposter syndrome and the rebuild and all of that, to still be able to push myself to seek out opportunities and be able to help somewhere. I think that was the most valuable thing to me. The other thing was, like I said, when I met the disaster recovery mentors, and also at DisasterWise, I met Steve Pascoe. He's also on this call, and he's one of our disaster recovery mentors, and he kind of took me under his arm and has always looked after me. And just having those people that believe in you, that see something in you, and that nurture how you can professionally grow, and opportunities for learning, pointing you in the right direction, and yeah, just introducing you to the right people at times. I think just building that network more and more, and then for yourself deciding, is this for me? Do I want to go in that space? Am I in that emotional state yet where I can cope with that space? That was another thing for me. Like, am I ready for this yet? Because I was still in the middle of my own recovery. Am I actually emotionally able to support other people, and is this really the road I want to take? And I suppose once I started working with the Red Cross, I also did a course in Melbourne called remind me again, Erin, what it's called, Foundations in Disaster Recovery, which was a wonderful course, not only because of the information that the materials you read and the information you learn, but also because of all the people that are in this space that you get to talk to throughout the course, the different perspectives. There were people working in government and not-for-profits. There were people working in all kinds of agencies and organizations and community groups. And it was just so awesome to share your journeys with one another and your learnings, and hearing about other resources that I might have not heard about. I feel like all of that sort of helped me learn a lot along the way, even though I didn't do the standard education at university around disaster management. I feel like that helped me a lot to become more confident in the space as well, and then be brave enough to actually apply for a role.
Thanks, Sabrina. I'm keen to hear your reflections and recommendations for people like me who may or may not be leading teams or managing people who've lived through disasters and might be feeling a bit unsure on how to best support people from an organisational perspective. Any hot tips? Asking for a friend. Tracey. Then Sabrina, please.
Okay, so let me just clarify. You're asking about, like, if you're forming a team.
Just for someone who might be managing people with lived experience of disasters, whether a volunteer team or a professional team, what are sort of the sorts of things that you think people like me can do to make sure that we're, supporting you guys to keep supporting community or to grow your professional careers?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, so actually it's something I'm actually very passionate about because, as anywhere globally, we are going to be impacted by more disasters, larger disasters, and more of them with our climate. That's the way it is. And I think we all need to be prepared in some way that we could each be impacted. So people who already have lived experience, they have this wealth of knowledge. And if we're leading people with current lived experience, that is something that we can come alongside and see how they would, where they're at, if they would be willing to step up and use that, or what supports they need to go further with that. So they might be someone who would like to take that further. And if that's the case, is it training that they need? Is it other further supports? And I think we always need to be mindful. People that have lived experience may also at any stage need further mental health supports. And I'm speaking personally too, that's the case. At any stage in your life, these things come back to bite you, because particularly if you haven't dealt with things well previously. And it's not always mental health supports, it can also be physical health. When you have been impacted by a disaster, your physical health takes a toll on that, particularly if you've been working in disaster recovery too for some time. So it's keeping track of people and just checking in on a number of levels. So it's checking in on how they're tracking. But I think if you've got a team that have people who've got lived experience and people who don't, then it's a matter of having collaborative conversations and sharing what people know and what they don't know. Because there is so much that you can talk about and say, okay, let's just unpack a lot of this stuff and share our experiences, and you can really grow a team by having that collaborative, connected talk, because you could do a lot with that. You could do a lot, but making sure that people have got the option to say, I'd like to do more, and then grow from there.
I love that point at the end, the collaborative space where we learn from one another, especially because our teams are such a mixed bag and you get so much, like everyone brings their own skills to the table, and it's so great to learn from one another, and it will help others who work in this space that are really passionate about it but might not have the lived experience to learn from those team members, and it might help them be even better at their job. I think another thing for me, I agree with the triggers. I have had that happen to me, and sometimes in moments where you least expect it, it can be, it might not even be anything related to to your experience or your fire. It could be something completely different. I had once watched a video in a normal learning module, and there was just a conversation in there that triggered me and had nothing to do with my fires. But I think just knowing that as a manager, or knowing that your manager is there for you to debrief, and that there's further support as well, emotionally, mentally, that you can lean on. I think the other thing is that for not saying that other people don't bring this, but I say that we bring a total different passion to the table. So sometimes we tend to probably overwork, tend to be workaholics in this space because we don't care about funding arrangements and when funding runs out, and we don't care about rules around any of this stuff. I think it can often be, for those people like me from lived experience, it can feel slow and bureaucratic and underfunded when you're working in these spaces, and therefore you get overly passionate. You want to make a difference. You want to be a change maker. You want to change this space and this industry for the better. So I think self-care is really, really important. Having a manager that reminds you of that regularly. I'm very lucky that I have one of those. I really thrive with strong boundaries because sometimes I don't have them. Because I just want to change the world. I want to go and support the people out there. And I have a huge amount of empathy. Like Tracey, we just want to go out there and make a difference and save every single person from having to live through what we lived through. So I think it's really important that we have people that keep reminding us of that, that there's work and there's life. You got to keep your balance. And even though you have the very best intentions, you got to still look after yourself, because otherwise you're even more triggered with the work that you do. And the other thing I think on top of that for me is the ongoing, and I don't think it's a personal thing, but I love learning. And when you already come from this lived experience space where you might feel imposter syndrome, I think having the opportunity to constantly develop yourself professionally and having opportunities to learn more, and your manager pointing that out, that's really it's really beneficial. It will build your confidence. It builds your background and makes you even better at your job. So just filling the gaps, like Tracey said.
I agree with everything Sabrina said. She nailed it.
Amazing. It's really heartwarming to hear just how much people have rallied around you both in different ways. Sometimes maybe not necessarily understanding it fully, but I think that importance of connection and understanding and listening is so key. You've also both just touched quite a lot on self-care. I guess it's the analogy of putting on your own oxygen mask before you try to put it on others. So I'm really keen to hear your insights and reflections on what's worked for you in terms of keeping you well and refilling your own cups in working and living in recovery. Tracey. Oh, Sabrina's got Tracey, go.
Okay, I will admit I'm rubbish at that. So
exactly totally what I was going to say, Tracey.
Really bad. But I am trying to improve. I just haven't yet found a system that works for me. But I am planning to be better. Now I am trying to be better, and I think actually this role that I'm in now, which is in preparedness, is going to be better in that regard, simply because there isn't the urgency. I've been in the recovery space for a long time now, and I've been working in the Hawkesbury, which has just been one compounding disaster after the other, and so it has been a lot of, you're going from, it's just one thing straight after the other. So it's been a high intensity role. And so self-care is just, it just doesn't happen because you're moving too quickly. But I think, yeah, it needs to be a priority. Absolutely. I would tell anyone in my team, absolutely, that has to be a priority. I just don't do it myself. And consequently, as I said before about physical health, I'll tell anyone out there right now, it does impact you. It comes back to bite you. So don't do it. Make sure you do self-care, look after yourself. Don't do what I do. So factor in things like I love to spend time outside. Actually, I'm a plant person, so I do fill the office with plants, indoor plants. I love that. And I actually exercise. I do a lot of exercise, I like to do that, but that's and I spend time with my family, and I like to laugh with my family. But there's other things I should possibly do, like I have terrible sleep, but everyone has different things they need to work on.
I said similar. I am lucky that I have very good support systems. So having I have 10 and 12-year-old children. They keep me very busy. So usually when it's time to knock off, they remind me of that. I need to spend time with them, which is good. But other than that, I think just having a really good, a strong support network at work and at home, and doing other things aside from work. I think that's the big thing for me. Like I started, this is such a country pumpkin Australian thing. I started playing netball again, and I not because I'm really good at it, but just because it's like I go on Wednesday nights, I go to training and I catch up with friends, and I just go out and I completely forget about work. And it's the physical thing, it's the social thing. It's just really helpful to turn it off and do something for yourself, and get together in a different team, where you have other other goals, whatever it is, winning or playing for fun or playing for the dinner and the drink after. But it helps. The other thing, like Tracey said, is I exercise. I like to do, I have dogs, so I like to walk every day in the morning and in the afternoon, so I don't want my day to just be work. I actually get up early, so I have something before and I have something after. Even if the days in winter are short, I need to have something else that I do, because otherwise it's all encompassing and it's really hard to step away. Even just playing in the garden. When we lost our house, we also lost our garden, and I didn't realize how much that hurt me, and how much playing with your hands in the soil and the dirt is actually bringing you back as a human. And every time I'm out there and I grow something from seed again, I feel like it's me blooming again. That's such a weird metaphor, but I just feel like it's really helped me appreciate life from a different angle. And I just love, even in my lunch break, to just step out in the garden, see how everything is going, watering everything, and then picking something that I use for my dinner and my salad. And it just gives me, that other thing in my life, that other side of me. And on top of that, I think just knowing that you have good people to talk to within your own team at work, but also good people in your personal life that you can unwind with, because there are times where you still anniversaries, and when you're triggered, when you're working and helping other people through a disaster, again, like it just brings so much back. Just having the opportunity to unwind and debrief with people, I think that's really important, and you feel much better once you've let it out.
I actually think you guys are doing all right at self-care. I mean, exercise, connection with nature. I'm going to hit you both up for gardening tips after this. So please and thank you, because I have no idea. And I think that what you've both said about regularly and both about continually trying, and somebody in the chats just talked about the frame of being a martyr or a professional, and making sure that you're continuously trying to build that in. And they've said, questioning yourself, am I being a martyr or am I being a professional, and I try to make sure that I don't end up giving all of my all, only most of my all, and hope that that can help somebody else. So thank you for putting that in the chat. But I think it is that continual need to balance it. But yeah, it's I think you guys are doing a very good job at self-care, and I'm going to take tips around don't just do work, have something else as well, because I think that's a really important insight to make sure you're building up your connections outside of the recovery space, where people might be understanding the recovery experience and the disaster experience, but then making sure you're connecting to something like netball, which I might have to learn how to catch a ball or something one day. That's pretty much all. I've got one last question I want to ask you guys just before we finish up at 2, but I just wanted to jump into the Q&A in the chat. There's a few questions, and I think we've sort of touched on this, but I thought it was quite timely around the conversation about self-care. Someone's just said, thank you for your generosity and honesty. I love listening to you all. For those of us who bring our lived experience to the work, it can be both incredibly meaningful and at times emotionally complex. How have you found ways to protect your energy and stay connected to your purpose over the years? And what would you say to someone who's just starting out, who's feeling both called and overwhelmed at the same time? Sabrina. Or have we might have lost Sabrina.
I think she's frozen.
All right.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want me to break it up into 2 parts? Because
I'll start and hopefully she's going to join. I don't want to. Oh, she's back. Sabrina, you're back. Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Did you hear the question?
No, I didn't. Sorry. I was just
okay. So we're talking about what would we say to someone who is feeling overwhelmed and I can't remember.
Both called, like drawn
and overwhelmed
to the work, but also overwhelmed.
So for me, like I think that's a perfect opportunity to come alongside them and possibly share something of your experience, so maybe a time of when you felt the same, because literally I think anyone who has had a lived experience has gone through that feeling of feeling both called and overwhelmed at the same time. But if that's not appropriate, I would say like that's a time to have a conversation around, well, what kind of things can we do to support you around the feeling of being overwhelmed? Because if you've got a passion there, like we want to see that protected. We want to make sure that you keep that safe. So it'd be around let's make sure that you don't get too like overwhelmed to the point where we can't continue this calling. That would be what I'd be working on, and definitely keeping that conversation around let's do this collaboratively. Let's continue on with help you with this calling, because it's really important work. We need to grow and develop as many people in this community recovery, disaster recovery, any kind of people in this space, because we are really, in the next few years, we're facing more and more disasters and more people. If people want to step up and say, I want to work in this space, or I have a passion for this, or I want to have more training, I think we really should be encouraging that. And if people can come alongside and say, I'll help you with that, I'll support you, I'll walk with you while you want to learn, I think it's great.
I think too, no matter if it's disaster recovery or emergency management, I think any lived experience in any space will come with, your feelings of passion and your doubts as well. So, for example, here on the island, I have a friend who has had a brain bleed and then developed a disability from that. And she has turned that around over the last 15 years and has now become an advocate for people with disabilities, of any kind of disabilities, and also works in this space. And I think that's similar to my journey living through a disaster and wanting to help people to overcome that. I think with whatever lived experience it is that we experience, if we feel passionate about wanting to work in this space or support others in this space, I think that there's a reason why we feel so strongly about it, probably because we have something to say that's unique or will hopefully help someone else. I feel like a bit is how I felt about this webinar today. I felt equally nervous and excited, and I think it's because it makes you prepare better. It makes you be better at your job. And it's the same when you have lived experience. You're so nervous about it because you don't know if you have all the information that you need, but you're also so excited about it because you know that you're going to make a difference. You have lived through this. You understand this person like no one else. And you have a skill set that, it can listen to them, and you can, and instead of passing out advice, you can listen to them and you know what they might need because you have been in that situation. So I think I think we're going to the question that says protecting your energy but staying connected over your purpose. I think if you're really passionate about it, you will stay connected to your purpose no matter what. So the most important thing is that you protect your energy, and protecting your energy is by doing what is humanly possible for you, but still looking after you, because all of the work that you do, what are you doing it for? You're doing it for your family, you're doing it for your life, you're doing it for all the other things that is there. So you need to find ways to unwind, find ways to move away from the space so you can fill your cup, because you can't give from an empty cup. If you constantly run on low, there's nothing to give, and you won't be able to help people with the experiences you've had and the knowledge you have to give. So I think whatever that might be for you, it's different for all of us. I like reading and puzzling. So whatever it is that fills your cup, I think you need to do more of that so that you can share what you have to share and get your voice out there, so others can learn from it and benefit from it.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions in here that I'll jump to about kind of recovery system, but I just wanted to just tease out a little bit more that once you've come into this work, have you felt like you've got capabilities and skills that you didn't realize you had before?
Definitely. There's lots of them. I think also that we all collect so many skills, and we have so many skills that we are being naturally given, that we might not realize until we need them in certain situations. So I have worked in so many spaces. I worked in tourism, I worked in marketing, I worked in communication, and I used to do property management on the island, and sometimes my resume looks a bit weird, it's like, oh my God, what did I do all this for? But all of it kind of came together. All of the things that I've learned along the way of like running a team and promoting what we do and how to talk to people, how to listen to people, how to share stories, and like all these things all came together for me. And I always thought that, there was no red line in my resume. I was just always following my passions and where I saw myself fit, and sometimes where I live too. But in the end, I feel like my journey, and I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. So I feel like all of this prepared me to be better at what I do now. And I so often use skill sets that I have learned when I was in my early 20s, so give my age away here, a long time ago. And I didn't know I would ever use them again. But there's so much when you're helping people in this space that you need to draw on so many different skill sets, and yeah, definitely. And I picked up so many more while volunteering and working with people, and so many more while rebuilding my own life. So it's you just keep collecting in your life.
So we didn't discuss this, but I honestly, my resume, I think, is very similar to Sabrina's. I have not followed a clear trajectory in my work life. I have a very varied resume leading up to this. But definitely the term post-traumatic growth was a real thing for me. Absolutely. I've developed skill sets that I didn't know I had, or even skills that I have developed even further. Yeah, it has been absolutely, I think, transformative in the way I work in, and I think for me, it's like, like they say, when you leave school and you're supposed to pick a degree or you're supposed to pick a pathway, and you know what you're supposed to do when you leave school. Like, who does really? No one does. But I kind of discovered that after the 2013 fires. It just honed everything in for me. And by the time that recovery period, that my role had finished, I just realized I had developed all of these skills and processes and ways of working and things that I knew about myself that I thought, how can I be this age and not know this about me? Like, such a light bulb moment, that I thought, I wish I had known this when I was younger. Like, I wish I had have known that I could do this, or I had this capacity and I had this capability. I wish I I thought, I wonder what I could have done. I could have been doing so much more now that I know that I can do so much more, that I could actually do all of these things. But then, yeah, it was definitely post-traumatic growth for me. And it's been amazing. It has been amazing. Yeah.
And sometimes when I look back at the disaster that I had to live through, I have said this and people have called me crazy. I said, I'm really grateful for it now, because it was a terrible experience. I don't wish it upon anyone, but I have had so many learnings, not just professionally, like what I want to do now and how I can help people. I think I wanted to study sociology, and I ended up not doing it, but I probably would have ended up in the same space. But it's always been the humanitarian, the helper in me that wanted to solve problems and wanted to go and be there for people. But I think there's also been so many learnings for me in my personal life as a human being, understanding like the appreciation that I now have for life, that I don't think I had that before. Like even what it has opened me up to. I would always say I've been someone that's open to the world, traveled lots, speak lots of languages, have met lots of people from different cultures. But what this has opened up to me has been totally different, and it's taken me down a path that I didn't see coming. But now I live my life every day being really, really, being really grateful for all the opportunities that I'm being given, for all the people that I meet. And every time something happens that might not be great and that I'm not happy about, I tell myself, it's okay. There's a reason why this is happening. There will be something coming out of this. With every pain that you experience, every growing pain, there will be growth at the end of this, exactly like it has been through the fires. So even though when I wake up and at the end of the day, you've had a shitty day, I think, okay, this is good for something. And my attitude has changed completely. And I think it's because of that monumental event that has happened in my life.
Thank you both. Now, this will be the last question, so I'm going to try and mush two together. I guess one thing that you hope for communities who live through disasters in the future. Acknowledgement to people in New South Wales who are currently experiencing flooding. Touch wood. So one thing you hope communities who experience disaster have into the future, and what can the emergency management sector do better to support communities after disasters?
That's a big question. I can see Tracey's hesitation too.
3 words or less.
I mean, what I hope for, what I hope for first is that we all know that we can't control the weather and the disasters will continue to happen. So I really hope that with all the experiences that we've had, not only in communities and the people that volunteer and work in this space with lived experience, but also the sector itself, that we can use all of that knowledge and all of the experiences to make it easier for people in their recovery. And like I said earlier, for me, it wasn't the disaster that was actually the hardest, it was the recovery that was a disaster. And there were so many situations where I thought, why are they doing it this way? Why is it so hard? Why can't there be a way of doing this differently and easier for people? Because we're already experiencing, like we're in a time of extreme trauma where we don't really need this on top of the load that we're living through. And I think by having more people who have lived experience step into the space and working and collaborating in the sector and sharing their knowledge, I'm hoping that it doesn't happen overnight, and we all know that it takes a long time, but that it will make things easier for people in communities, in the preparedness space, in the recovery space, and in the response space, that we know how to better support them, that we understand what tools we can give them to better prepare, and get better and better at this, and then in the end, how we can make recovery easier, because it's such a draining process. So I know this is a really big blah blah answer, but it's something that I'm really hoping to work towards, just continuing to make things easier for people.
Okay, that is a big double barrel question. For me, I would think for communities, I would really like to see more social connectedness, because we know how important social connectedness is to all parts of disaster recovery. And honestly, I think social connectedness, particularly tied to preparedness, if people, we walk around in communities all the time, and you would not know just by looking at someone what lived experience they have of a disaster. We would not know. And yet there'd be people that could be sharing the news or the knowledge that they have around experiences in their own space where they live that could benefit that person next door in the next street. And I just think if we increase how to do that, I don't know, but increase social connectedness in Australian communities would give us much better outcomes across the board, social outcomes, just in every factor that you could think of, really, but particularly in terms of disasters. I think that would be great. And just remind me, what was the second part of the question?
What could the emergency or recovery managers or the sector do better?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's not really the emergency manager's role, but in the sector in particular, like an emergency managers probably fall underneath being copped with this a lot too. But in the sector in general, there is a funding cycle that is very difficult to work with. I myself am in my 5th grant funded role, so everything finishes on the 30th of June. And I understand funding is essential. Positions have to be funded. However, anyone in this webinar will understand. I only have to say funding, and I know there's people who will be nodding in there. I just know it's difficult. It's tricky. There's sometimes funding is not long enough, or there is things that are funded twice in different places, but I think the funding is difficult. And if you want to work in this space, it is really, really tricky. It's tricky for existing emergency managers to get staff in. that they're only there for a short amount of time. If you want to work in this space, you have to be prepared to know that the likelihood of you getting a full-time role is really hard, which means you need to have a contingency in place, you know, for your income, for your livelihood. It's hard. So that's something to consider. If you want to work in this kind of an area, it's very difficult. So that is something I would really like to see improved. How, I don't know, but that's a big issue.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry.
You go, Sabrina.
Just from a community perspective, what I hope as well, not so much for me in my role, I agree wholeheartedly with everything Tracey said about like working in the sector and what, you know, would be great to see some changes. But from a community perspective, and what I would love to see is currently the situation around competitive grants and one size fits all is really something that I struggle with. Every community is unique. Every community has a different history, different background, different experiences. Some have never lived through or never had a really big disaster. Some have lived through who knows how many, and they need a different recovery shoe. It doesn't work the same everywhere, and I think that's something that's very, very frustrating in communities, being not in control. And I think whenever we are given control, then it's all given to us, which also puts the load on communities. So if we can find a balance between putting communities in charge of their own recovery while supporting them with some of the non-existent skill sets that, you know, some of the admin and some of the other knowledge that might not be within communities, and just helping train people up so they can be in charge of their own recovery, and therefore also make them more resilient for anything that's coming in the future. If they are so unfortunate, that I would like to see. At the moment with competitive grants, we are one community against another at times, and that doesn't help anyone. So that would be, that I would love to see a change in the sector around that.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to jump in because I am sitting here nodding furiously along with both of you, and I think you've just summed that up really beautifully. So in the chat, there's, I just want to share this. This last part is so relatable. The CV structure, the challenges, the skills, the post-traumatic growth. I feel so seen. Thank you for your insights. Thank you both for your sharing your amazing experience and knowledge of what you've been through. Thank you for being courageous and stepping into the disaster management space. You are so incredibly valuable with what you have to offer. A comment about agreeing that recovery doesn't necessarily finish on the 30th of June or the 31st of December. It just doesn't work. It's very unpredictable and hard to navigate the sector as an individual. And yeah, just thank you so much. On behalf of Red Cross and the Disaster Recovery Mentors, thank you, Tracey and Sabrina, for sharing today. Thank you for everyone who has made the time to come and listen to Tracey and Sabrina. I have learnt so much. Thank you for everyone who's shared their insights in the chat. It always makes it a lot more fun. When you exit today's webinar, you'll get a short survey that really helps us to plan future ones. You can put suggestions for future topics that you'd like to hear about, and it helps us just keep improving and making sure that what we're putting on meets your needs. It was absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to the next one on the 23rd of July. Keep your eyes out for the flyer. We'll be sending that out shortly. It will be on the compounding impacts of multiple disasters on communities. So again, big up Tracey and Sabrina. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone on the line today. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.